Okay, Assalamu alaikum. I'm part 20 on page 64 under the title Muslims and Higher Education. Professor Ajam's book on edited version, the original Islam-based schools in Cape Town and the struggles of Muslim for education. There's Dr. Ajam again. Is in 1939, in Dr. Abdul last address to the African People's Organization, he mentioned the following, which was then in 1989 seen as a prophecy. Quote, the age of charity, tolerance, and kindliness has passed away, and the age of fear, of unreasonable suspicion, and of blind prejudice, which is the deformed offspring of the union of these two, has usurped its place. Has usurped its place. The place of true learning. In the course of liquidation, fresh, constructive, far-sighted, and dispassionate thinking is at an awful discount, and more lip service is being paid to the great principle of love, already too so distorted by racial bias that its original purity and simplicity can no longer be found or even recognized. The Wilcox Commission, page 165. I'm going to read it again. The age of charity, tolerance, and kindness has passed away, and the age of fear and unreasonable suspicion, and of blind prejudice, which is the deformed offspring of the union of these two, has usurped its place. In other words, the place of charity and tolerance and kindliness. True learning is in the course of liquidation. We're losing true learning. Fresh, constructive, far-sighted, true learning is in the course of liquidation. Fresh, constructive, far-sighted, and dispassionate thinking is at an awful discount, and more lip service is being paid to the great principle of love, already so distorted by racial bias that its original purity and simplicity can no longer be found or even recognized. Beautiful piece. A plethora of laws were directed against the powerless, bore testimony of the unreasonable suspicion and blind prejudice. This is a quote from Dr. Ajam's thesis. Dr. Abdurrahman was certainly one of the few non-white contemporaries who might have made a claim on true learning. With the rise of barriers of racial laws and custom, his example was made difficult to follow. People who were not white were victims of denial and exclusion. The doctor had charisma and far-sightedness, which few, including whites, then could share. Abdurrahman found his community in crisis, caused largely by a reduction of civil liberties and the traditional education emphasizing duties. So traditional education emphasized duties, while his own education emphasized rights. He wished his own true learning for others. His work and efforts required of his community an attitudinal change. Remember, he was from a rich family, was sent away to Scotland to qualify as a doctor because coloureds were not allowed to actually do any higher education in South Africa. Spokesman 40 years ago acclaimed Dr. Abdurrahman as the greatest coloured man South Africa had produced. For several years, he was his people's policymaker, chief negotiator, and principal spokesman. He continually condemned the deplorable conditions of education for colored children and the necessity of raising their level. It was he and MP Morris Alexander who made the University of Cape Town opened its doors to enable Harold Cressy to study his BA degree. Van der Ross is quoted from Van der Ross, page 32. Muslims were also beneficiaries of the doctor's efforts. The Muslims mourned his passing and praised his achievements. The Cape Muslim Circle placed on record in a meeting held by them, Weber, page 358. This meeting places on record the untimely death of Dr. Abdurrahman, who was a champion of the colored people for 40 years, as a national calamity and an irreparable loss to the Muslim community. Dr. Abdurrahman drew around him many kindred spirits, as when he found the 3 Muslim mission schools, of which he became the manager. That in turn encouraged others further away from Cape Town to found local education committees that would create similar schools. Often Abdurrahman was consulted and served as mentor. Except for Wynberg and Worcester, he always set the school apart from the mosque without alienating the local imams. As president of the African Political Party, the fez-wearing doctor, counselor, who could quote scripture, impressed upon Christians and Muslims of the need for schools as the first requirement of the community seeking social justice. He had those that did not agree with him in the tighter position as member of council and community Muslim, and his work for the people drowned critics. His spirit was never completely vanquished, whatever the challenge. Religion was to the doctor the way to help the needy, not a ritualistic dogma. He was invited to grace a Christian class opening and invited a Christian missionary to grace the opening of a school for mission children. Without his unique educational background, his cosmopolitan association, his personal charisma, and his political position, he could not have achieved his educational objectives for the coloreds in general and for the Muslims in particular. He was like a cultural amphibian, moving with ease between the subculture of the constituency and the mainstream culture of the dominant class, articulating the aspirations of the one to the other and sharing the semantic space with both. The doctor's achievements in getting state involvement in schooling were significant steps to increase state involvement in the social advancement of colored people, Van der Ross. Abdurrahman's educational achievements meant that a Muslim child initially socialized in the values and norms of the home could have that training reinforced in an Islam-oriented school, primary school, and thereafter be further socialized into mainstream culture as a secular secondary and tertiary institutions without parental fear of alienation. Dr. Abdurrahman did not publish and neither gave many speeches in his Muslim community as he did for the non-Muslims. It may have been that he was more proficient in English and his community was primarily Afrikaans speaking. He reciprocated to his community by what he established for them. His actions spoke to them louder than his words. He spread his word to gain respect and help for them from the dominant class in political meetings. Every disadvantaged section of the Cape needed his attention. The Muslims needed him for the modernized educational needs, their housing and health needs. He provided his best on all fronts. While Burdin and Hamid used mass Malay mobilization for their modernization of Muslim education, Abdurrahman operated in small, relatively obscure but effective community committees who were race integrated. Abdurrahman was clearly the most astute and better endowed intellectually and more powerful politically to achieve his goals. There were no overt personal gains for Abdurrahman, other than age and influence as unpaid manager of the schools. While Burdin became the paid principal of the Weinberg School, he moved to establish. In failing to get Malan to deliver, Hamid could not deliver the political service that Abdurrahman did without claim to public acknowledgement. During the 1930s, Abdurrahman remained a formidable public figure compared to his earnest rivals in stature as Muslim leaders. That is now a beautiful kind of comment on who Dr. Ajam was, as extracted from the different particular resources with the words of Dr. Abdurrahman, of Dr. Ajam, and put together in the best possible way by myself as editor to capture the style of Professor Ajam and the importance of what he was writing about. We're now coming to South Africa's changing political climate, 1940 to 1980. The establishment of Muslim schools was also a political statement that Dr. Abdurrahman drove through. He did not approve of separate color-based educational institutions, but rather the opportunity of disenfranchised group to gain access to education while still being able to honor their heritage. He was a pragmatist. After the death of Dr. Abdurrahman, one must remember that this particular thesis specifically says, and the role of Dr. Abdurrahman in this process of establishing Islam-based schools. Okay, so that's why so much is written about Dr. Abdurrahman, but he had done a lot for the communities. After the death of Dr. Abdurrahman, every step, the separate ladder of colored advancement was disparaged by those aspiring to fill the vacuum of leadership by Dr. Abdurrahman. There were derogatory remarks for persons and organizations that sought to effect change by conformity and the political dispensation of the teacher's role in society. The political dimension of the teacher's role in society became more pronounced. Muslim teachers in Muslim mission schools were confronted with an identity crisis. The radicalized teachers eschewed sectarianism while they were occupying posts in Muslim mission schools because they fought against bodies through which the state strove to preserve segregation and the slave identity. World War II changed the patron-client ethos to the paternalistic style of white domination. The city teacher oscillated between a rationalist and a traditionalist. While being exposed to the onslaught of political agendas in schools, the Muslim teacher was also drawn to his religious faith. The Muslim teacher had to accept that the two forms of schooling, Muslim and non-Muslim, will have to exist parallel to each other. They also realized the limits of expansion of this small Muslim mission schools. Muslim mission schools after Dr. Abdurrahman. After Dr. Abdurrahman's death, new managers were appointed to the Muslim mission schools. It was then classified as state-aided schools under Christian denomination provision. Each school was self-regulated. The staff was paid by the Cape Provincial Administration. The state paid rent grants to the schools for using community buildings for their state-aided schools. The fundraising through bazaars and concerts were the duties of the staff and parents. All colored schools, including Muslim mission schools, were starved of state funding, while white schools were well state-funded. All curriculum requirements applied to all schools, irrespective of the lower funding for non-white schools. That is the strategy of social engineering. Make the educational level and the requirements for passing the same, provide the elite with enough funding to make sure and housing so that they can succeed, and drop the masses in terms of housing and payment and position so that they cannot get it and so that they fail. those particular standardized exams on a mass scale. Rahmania became the training grounds for all principals of the Muslim mission schools. Very important point. The following Rahmania staff members became principals at other Muslim mission schools. They were the following: Mr. M.A. Baker, Simonstown Muslim Primary School. These are all people that worked at Rahmania that became principals. O. Misbah, Sheikh Yusuf Primary School. M.H. Ali, Habibia Kokani Educational Institute. M.A. Arnold, Strand Muslim Primary School. I. Adams, Strand Muslim Primary School. A.E. Abdurrahman, Talfala Institute. M.S. Burdin, Muhammadiyah Primary School. A. Khan, Scottish School Primary School. And Mrs. Manuel, Siddiqui Primary School. Many Rahmania methods and management approaches, teaching methods, and other practices were then transported to these schools. After 1943, new Muslim schools were established, mainly by Indian businessmen. These Indian schools were not exclusively for Indian children, but for Muslim children. This allowed for a certain level of social integration, even though some Indian village agendas were prevalent in its aims. Example, Kokand and Morba. Rahmania Anglo-Urdu Primary School, Douglas Road Primary, was initiated on the 15th of October 1940 by men connected to the Morba Indian village. They constituted themselves as the Morba Anjuman Society of Men of Morba. They acquired a hall in Douglas Road, Wynberg, and opened the school on the 6th of January 1941. In 1942, Master Dansai was brought from India as headmaster. The state did not recognize his teaching qualifications, and he was replaced by a local qualified teacher, Mr. M. Ori. Mr. Dansai stayed on as the Arabic teacher. The apartheid had started in 1948, making life difficult for non-whites, Muslim resource unification, and making this life difficult for non-whites. Muslim resource unification allowed Douglas Road Primary in 1957 to erect 6 extra classrooms. In 1958, they received a state subsidy. Arabic and Urdu teachers were not paid by the state. In 1960, the Colored Affairs Department of all colored schools. The school did not need external borrowing funds. Apartheid's impact on teachers. In 1950, you can see that the thesis by Dr. Ajam covers a wide range of information about from 1658 right up to 1980. And so his thesis is groundbreaking. As Professor Harun states, you cannot do anything on Cape Muslim history without going through this particular thesis. And I am hoping, by having been honored to do the edited version of this particular thesis, that people will consult with a large thesis of 500 to do other beautiful works from there. And obviously, these theses are available. His thesis is available at UCT Library, etc. And it's also, I think, on the Afrikaner internet. You can actually download it from the internet. If you go into UCT Afrikaner, I think, library or something like it. But it's available. I saw it's available. I can download the whole thesis from there. Right. Apartheid's impact on teachers. We now at that particular point, which is page 68. In 1956, the Botha Commission of Inquiry into Colored Education was launched, which reported that mission schools were no longer desirable. Those who defended the status quo argued that state schools cannot properly serve the religious and moral needs of the children. The objection of the state were: education suffers due to denominational rivalry. Teacher organization objected to the continued church control. and fundraising is time-consuming. Muslim mission schools were generally poorly maintained, except Indian mission schools, where Indian businessmen subscriptions were sufficient to maintain them. Very interesting. The subscriptions of Muslim businessmen allowed the Indian Muslim schools to continue on a good footing, to maintain it. Meadows Lansdowne Muslim School resorted to a dance and bazaar to raise funds. Cape Standard, 16 July 1940. This was a rather extreme form of fundraising, not generally accepted by Muslims, but its separate schools were to develop their schools in the absence of proper funding. In 1951, the teachers organized themselves into an organization to address their poor working conditions, overcrowded classes, poor ventilation, and poor lit rooms, as well as inadequate recreational facilities. So you see, that tells you you cannot succeed an exam which is standardized for everybody with those kind of problems in your school. That ensures that many non-whites cannot go through up till grade 12 and never be able to enter the university. And so it empowers the elite always to have access to the university and be in control of the masses as professionals, The apartheid government laws intensified the resolve of racial-colored intelligentsia. Dr. Abdurrahman's brainchild, the Teachers League of South Africa, had by 1943 reached its formalization stage. The crisis between pragmatists and radicals ushered in the Teachers Educational and Professional Association. The association was opened and non-aligned to religious affiliation. These were the teachers who accepted that religion is a private matter. The League had a non-collaborationist approach. Many of these modernized Muslims were key spokesmen for the League. A latent aim of the Muslim Mission School was also to generate an Islam-oriented teacher. Such a teacher will not easily privatize Islam to secularize radically politicized education. Such a teacher will also not present professionalism as a Christian concept of an ideal. A new Islam-oriented teacher association was then the only option. An inaugural meeting was held on the 10th of October 1951 to formulate the Muslim Teacher Association. This association's main aim was to uplift the Muslim community in their spheres, educationally, socially, economically, and spiritually. This comes from the Al-Munir official organ of Muslim Teacher Association, June 1953, page 11. The objective included active interest in the education of Muslim children, which included finding bursaries, scholarships, and grants for Muslim children, assist with renovations and extensions of existing Muslim schools, strive for more state schools where necessary, to draft the Muslim religious instruction syllabus, to ensure the systematic teaching of Islam, to strive for the introduction of Arabic at secondary schools, to strive to establish social centers, establish girls and boys clubs, first aid, sewing, physical culture, and the establishment of an orphanage and maintain an official journal. The above objectives indicate the shortages in the community at the time and the desperate need for it. The MJC, the Muslim Judicial Council, also aimed to have a centralized syllabus and inspection system for Islamic education 6 years before the Muslim Teachers Association placed this objection on paper. But nothing came of it. Some of the objectives of MTA were identical to the Teachers League, but only focused on Muslim children. So there you get involved with the politics and the establishment organizations, etc., etc. But while they're still working into the systems that has become legally entrenched. The state's bulk education budget for the white fraternity could be seen in the MTA's, the Muslim Teachers Association, President's discrimination of education facilities, which he found in the Cape Education Department statistics. Institutions, whites and coloreds. Training colleges, 7 white ones, 1 colored one. High schools, 181 white High schools, 13 colored ones. Secondary schools, 57 white schools and 17 colored schools. Agricultural schools, 3 white schools and no colored schools. Farm schools, 21 white farm schools, 19 colored schools. Church schools, 28 white schools, no colored schools. Primary schools, 950 primary white schools, 78 colored schools. Mission schools, no white schools, 1,003 colored mission schools. The president of the MTA also mentioned that there were at the time 15 Muslim mission schools, the majority going up till standard 3, grade 5. With the exception of Abibia, it went up to standard 6, which is grade 8 in 1953. The MTA was already attacked as a sectarian body because the oppressed were struggling for a democratic right of existence in South Africa. False accusations were laid in the press and they defended, but to no avail. The drive was lost, and after December 1953, no new edition of the journal was published, and by 1960, the Muslim Teachers Association was defunct. Okay. The concern of the Muslim Teachers Association was the international fear of Muslims that secularization, quote, vulgarizes people's attitudes to every aspect of life and God. I like that statement. It vulgarizes people's attitudes to every aspect of life and God. Very good. They are aware that if it is born out of human arrogance, which promotes the notion that God does not matter and that religion is not relevant in the organization of human affairs, politics, knowledge, and even religious pursuit itself. All these have become cheap commodities subjected to higher powers, but to the whims, subjected not to higher powers, but to the whims of those who rule. This comes from I. Suleiman, Education and Imperialism, page 35, July 1985. Even though the Muslim Teachers Association had a relatively short lifespan, it planted the seeds of Muslim resurgence through informal education programs. It envisaged a twofold purpose for secondary and high school students. They would offer religious instruction, mathematics and English classes at the Azavia Mosque Hall. Quote, in addition, courses on first aid, photography, dressmaking, etc. will also be instituted for the students, and a well-stocked library will be placed at their disposal. The Al-Munir, December 1953, page 23. The reasons why the MTA declined could be deduced as follows. It only served 15 Muslim schools in their constituency. It was mostly composed of primary school teachers whose education level did not exceed standard 10 or grade 12. It had a limited scope, community upliftment through community services and informal education. Having no labor management norm issues. The name Muslim Teachers Association was unfortunately provocative to certain political orientations. Its launch coincided with imposition of the Colored Affairs Department. The MTA ideological intent lacked public endorsement and resources. Its leadership was unskilled and poor to resist vilification against them. It emphasized a religious cause in a secularist social order that wanted modernity and progress and viewed religion as the antithesis of social advancement. So here you see already secularization has impacted on religious faith and religious influence, which is the aim of secularization, obviously, to take away the God out of the equation and put themselves in there. The organization did not have a charismatic leader, except for 2 editions of their journal and a booklet on a distinguished visiting scholar. They published nothing thereafter. The MTA should have been less open about the Islamic intention. This is the point of Professor Ajam, while pursuing practical needs of the Muslim child, like Abdurrahman. But his history was not yet compiled, and a careful study of his leadership modus operandi was not yet completed. So you see that Professor Ajam had done an enormous amount of work to bring Dr. Abdurrahman onto the platform that people can see what someone else has done who had a heart for people. Colored education was again under inquiry in 1956 by the Botha Commission, and the following was revealed. 83% who entered the 1947 only reached standard 6, grade 8. 37,500 children eligible for school could not be accommodated. Children entered the school older than usual because of the long waiting lists. There were a shortage of qualified teachers and proper equipment. There were not enough schools to accommodate all the colored children. The families were poor and living in squalid home conditions. By increasing the school accommodation, the government will enable to make schooling compulsory for colored children. There was a realization that mission schools will have to be phased out. The state was ready to assume greater responsibility for school provision to ensure universal compulsory school attendance. The commission, so you see, they're not really that they're interested, but if they want to be accepted in the global market, these are the things that the global particular organization press on countries. So outside pressure forces some internal changes, not that the hearts really want to change. The commission was informed by the following Matthew Arnold recommendation that there should be a law of compulsory education for all learners. Okay. That the education should evoke appreciation for parents. There should be a reasonable standard of living for all. The Commission's recommendations could not easily be implemented because the state still depended heavily on mission schools, which cannot easily be brought to compulsory education. The recommendations that churches in the remote country districts be encouraged to continue establishing and maintaining schools. The recommendation that the churches in the remote country districts be encouraged to continue establishing and maintaining their schools. The rent grants be fixed to 8% of erection building costs, placed more financial strain on the Muslim mission schools to maintain and improve their facilities. The recommendation of the Botha Commission were to be incorporated into state policy and eventually enacted as law in the Colored Persons Education Act number 47 of 1963. By this means, the mission schools became the responsibility of the Colored Affairs Department. This act also stipulated that no one might manage a private school at which more than 14 colored pupils were enrolled, unless the school was registered with the department. Venter Colored, a profile of 2 million South Africans, page 32. From between 1964 to 1970, Muslim mission schools enrollment remained static at 5,425 pupils. This suggests that no significant expansion occurred during that period. The implementation of the Group Areas Act number 41 of 1950 reduced the enrollment even further. From between 1955 to 1963, few educational initiatives were possible in a climate of political uncertainty, for even modernization of facilities had to wait the declaration of the various group areas. The promulgations reserving certain areas for whites, coloreds, and Indians were issued in 1957, 1958, and 1961. The school boards planned new schools to serve the new housing schemes in the undeveloped areas. This took years. Meanwhile, Colored children were allowed to attend their schools in proclaimed white areas, but no further improvements were made to it, thus leaving it to become increasingly dilapidated. District 6 was declared white, rezoned and renamed Zonnebloem, and 36,000 people were evicted from their homes and their community facilities. 27 million was spent to clear and flatten the area to make place for the best planned, most charming, most luxurious reminder we were likely to see the avariciousness of apartheid as it is practiced. This was quoted in the Cape Argus of 10th of January 1969. That was the aim of District 6. And District 6 became just a barren area, which became the proof of the failure of apartheid. It was just so, the Creator, God is in charge of everything. The Muslim mission schools in District 6 gradually noticed the reduction in its enrollment. At Muir Street Mission Primary School, the pupil numbers declined from 435 in 1964 to 172 in 1976. Muir Street would have had extreme extensions made after inspection in 1966 found the physical education and sanitary facilities inadequate. On the 30th of August, the school manager responded to the department that the adjacent 3 houses intended to build the necessary toilets and classrooms on could not be vacated because the rent board would not allow the committee to evict the tenants. They got their hand in everywhere in trying to block things. He also stated that the children at present use their home toilets because they live close by. He also mentioned that the school is opposite a public toilet. Ya Allah. Shame. From aforementioned, it became clear the other statutory body, the Rent Control Board, regarded accommodation for families more important than the extension of the school grounds. This also indicated the scarce housing problem of the time. The mosque's basement was then used for the additional classes Muir Street Muslim Primary School needed. This separated the complement of teachers and pupils from the main building. St. Paul's had a similar situation where St. Paul's church rooms and the hall in Buitengraaf Street, a few streets away from the main building in Bryan Street, was used to accommodate the extra classrooms and hall needed. In 1971, the mosque rooms were no longer used due to the decline in enrollment, and in 1977, the Director of Colored Affairs advised the principal that the school would be closed from January 1978. Financial compensation was received from the demolition of the school building. Yeah, these people are heartless people. The inspection of Sheikh Yusuf Primary School in Freire Street, District 6 in 1966 revealed the lack of support the state gave to District 6 schools. Repairs were not done even though every year the report for repairs was submitted to the department. Regular burglaries and vandalization were prevalent. Windows, doors, locks, fencing were missing. Classrooms were poorly lit. On the 21st of January 1969, the school was mysteriously destroyed by 2 fires, and the 230 learners were placed in surrounding schools, while the principals and staff were transferred into alternative posts. There was no question about the rebuilding of the school because it was now a white area. A similar thing happened to another school where the school was approached by a private company to buy the grounds at the back. And the school refused because that belongs to the school. Somehow, the school started burning mysteriously on one morning, where this complete staff records, I mean, the strong rooms, everything was destroyed of that school. The school was then moved to another venue. This is in the time I was like already in other educational institutions. And the principal then reported that he was told by the department to actually move the school to another venue, and they're going to re-establish or revamp the school or repair the school. And suddenly he heard through the grapevine that the school, that the company and the Department of Education was actually going to get rid of that property and give it over to the private private company. He then decided to take his children back and walk back to the original school, even though he didn't have an office and all the office section was destroyed. He then took all his children back from the other school that they had put him in meanwhile and occupied the school with his children. And the government could not, in actual fact, chuck those children out. And this was after apartheid. So you see that when there's money, people are like looking at other means. Okay. So the school still exists on the same property, and they haven't been able to run a deal with the business people because it had tremendous potential on that property. This is like things that I've experienced in my adult life. Okay, that is after apartheid came to a fall. So in 1966, the Muslim Mission School in District 6 were doomed as enrollment. There was no question about the rebuilding of the school because it was now declared a white area. After 1966, the Muslim Mission schools in District 6 were doomed as enrollment plummeted as the vicinity vanished under the bulldozers. Okay, that's a sad situation. People were sitting in their homes and the bulldozers came and just broke down their houses. Rahmania Institute, located at the eastern end of District 6, still had an appreciable catchment area as parents' homes were close to the school, but further from the city center. Survival from year to year depended on how long the hand of authorities could be stayed. At one time, it was the biggest school in the city with an enrollment of 800 pupils and a staff of 20 teachers. But by 1963, its enrollment dropped by 130 because the children's parents rented in District 6 and they were evicted. The school had turned into an Afrikaans medium school due to poorer Afrikaans-speaking children that attended. Because of the Botha Commission also recommended that the medium of the school must be the home language of the pupils. Dr. Abdurrahman wished it to be an English medium school. Rahmania made an appeal in the press to the public to prevent its redundancy. Quote, "It is therefore up to all the Muslims to rally to the call that is to sacrifice and send their children to Rahmania." Unquote. Rahmania made another move. It requested the administration of Colored Affairs to relocate Rahmania with its staff and name intact to a colored area, Saria State, Athlone. A non-Muslim deputation would be welcome to allow non-Muslims to attend Rahmania, and they would be prepared to accept these children's state religious instruction syllabus for them. The plea to the Department of Rahmania by Rahmania management included it had a profound impact on the religious and secular professionals and business community. Religious instruction had a sober and deterring effect on the past pupils, despite, quote, permissiveness and communist influences, unquote. Rahmania Institute was to the Muslims what Zonneblum Training College and its branches had been to the Christians. And it would be a sad day if Rahmania were to go out of existence. Mr. Jakut, in his letter to the Department of Current Affairs, dated 6th of August 1974, stated, "We have always taught our charges to respect the authority placed over us, as stated in the Quran, and will continue to do so." This was a spirited defense. It was an appeal to the education authority to recognize the value of Islam in shaping the lives of the citizenry, and also to acknowledge religion's influence in maintaining political stability. The authorities were adamant state schools could not be associated with religious sentiment and desire to ensure continuity and the school ethos in the group area. The Muslim Assembly. Rapid changes in the geographical distribution of the Western Cape's mission population occasioned by the Group Areas Act. A new Muslim social cultural organization was established in 1968. The Muslim Assembly. The organization formulated a new Islamic religious instruction syllabus, complete with textbooks, teaching aids, as well as inspection system. A request was submitted to the department that the syllabus be implemented in state schools under its control, and that is under the control of the Muslim Assembly. On 16th of March 1970, a deputation was received by the Director of Colored Education to discuss the principle of an official Islamic syllabus in state schools that would compensate for the loss of Muslim mission schools closed down in declared white areas. The Director of Colored Education, Mr. Moore, gave the following reasons why the department is unable to entertain the proposed Islamic religious instruction syllabus. Quote, "No external inspection can be allowed because all schools must be state-controlled only. They cannot restrict the newly founded denominations that will re-establish themselves in the group areas. Only Christian religious instruction is allowed in South African schools, the country being a Christian country. But no child should be compelled if the parents object to the denominational religious customs for religious instructions and at state schools. It will be upheld. But the department had no objections to Islamic religious instructions to be taught at state schools, provided that the principal can arrange these classes. A Muslim teacher is willing to teach it and that there is a significant number of Muslim children at the school to justify it. The state cannot be expected to prescribe a particular Islamic curriculum, and neither can the state compel a teacher to teach a particular Islamic curriculum. No Islamic curriculum can be circulated as an official matter, however good it is. The Muslim Assembly has the liberty to promote its Islamic curriculum among principals and obtain their cooperation in implementing it, and the department will not interfere in such cooperation." It's taking the time. 1640. Okay. Full transfer of a Muslim school. On Talfala's request, the Director of Education transferred the entire school population from Draper Street, Claremont, which was declared white, to a new colored area in 4th Avenue, Sherwood Park, in December 1971, with the following stipulations. The new school site is fully owned by the School Management Committee in the spirit of the original trust fund. If need be, that the school will only sell the building back to the department. The school must retain its original name, Talfalah Institute. The school must also retain the post of an Arabic teacher over and above other teaching posts that might be created. There must also be a commitment that the school will not exclusively be for Muslims. The Department of Colored Affairs reserves the right to take over the school at any time as a state school. The department will also pay the monthly salary rental to the committee, and that the state aid will continuously be paid by the Department of Colored Affairs. Although this move was forced by the apartheid machinery, as in inverted commas, The staff and pupils welcomed the vast improved working and learning conditions. A tasteful design, 24 classroom building complex, complete with an administration block, which signified modernization. The people that played a major role in the transfer between 1969 and 1971 were the late Mr. Kasim Isaacs and the late Mr. Hasim Magat. Mr. C. Isaacs became the first principal. Mr. Kasim Isaacs became the first principal of the new school, which in 1974 had a staff of 48 and an enrollment of 1,400 pupils. During the period, Dr. R. E. van der Ros was the circuit inspector of education. And this is the van der Ros that is being quoted all the time in terms of, because he was a ardent academic. My goodness, this man had a line of qualifications and PhDs. Although the move was unsuccessful attempts, the Pal Muslim community received notification that their mosque and missions and Muslim mission school fell in the new declared white area. Formal protests were fruitless. An application for extension to the school was denied, and the renting of the premises in the colored area of Klein Drakenstein was suggested by the department. The school management was offered 3 other settlement options. Apartheid pressure forced management to accept the move. The uprooting of this long-standing community caused immeasurable anxieties and heartache. The construction of the new school applied for by the Administration of Colored Affairs was rejected by the Department of Agricultural Credit and Land. The land could only be leased. The Pal Muslim community's appeal for a stay on their removal was unsuccessful. Some suggested that the children be dispersed to the interdenominational schools in Pal and attend afternoon madrasa. The Pal Muslim Jama'ah memorandum to members of the Colored Persons Representative Council, 18 of May 1973, rebutted such suggestions with the following. It is educationally unsound to expect fatigued children from day school to attend another one in the afternoon. Afternoon madrasas show a 40 to 50% absenteeism. Working parents cannot supervise the children's afternoon madrasa attendance. Children left with grandparents or strangers often lack the required discipline and application. Several extra venues will have to be hired for only a part of the afternoon for a community that is already struggling. The best idea is to have the children at one place for one instruction session. The Colored Persons Representative Council did not bring relief to the plight of the Pal Muslims. The overwhelming forces of apartheid terminated the Pal Muslim Mission School in May 1974, and the entire staff and 5 teachers and 200 pupils were transferred to the brand new state institution, New Orleans Primary School. The Simonstown Muslim Mission School suffered the same fate under the apartheid government. The account of their stability was used as a plea to the group areas board on the 4th of August 1959, that they showed a sense of unity between Indians and Malay Muslims, and they were major contributors to the successful South African fishing industry, and were law-abiding citizens who developed themselves over 50 years. Did not matter to apartheid. That didn't matter to the apartheid state machinery. In 1968, disqualified families were vacating their homes so that the Simonstown might exclusively be for white South Africans and white immigrants from Europe. Refusal to vacate your home in a declared white area meant risking prosecution and being forcibly evicted. It is ironical that during the same time in 1965, that the fate of the school coincided shortly after an enthusiastic young principal was appointed to Simonstown Muslim Mission's primary school and commended for securing extra premises and staff for the school through the respect and support he received from parents. But before significant progress could be noted, the school's enrollment dropped as poorer families were relocated in Ocean View, Slankhop. Towards the end of 1968, the regional representatives of the Department of Colored Affairs advised Mr. Baker of the Management Committee that the Regulation H4 grant to the school would be terminated on the 1st of January 1969. The pupils and principal and staff were transferred to Arsenal Primary School in Simonstown. Thus came the end of another Muslim mission school. I'm going to stop here. I'm getting tired. I'm going to have to stop here and take a break. Thank you very much. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.